Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
It's funny because you always say here as always, because it's like, yes, as we always do on this show.
Mm-hmm.
This week, it feels like, no, we have just been sitting in these chairs right here and right there. There we go. That chair the whole week. It's just been like, you know what? Let's hit stop. Let's hit record. Let's do another show. Tony, there's another guy in the portal. Guess what? There's someone coming in the portal. Guess what? Hey, Oregon played another game that we just watched. Hey, so good news, Tony. There's more podcasts coming. So hope all you wonderful folks out there in podcast/YouTube land wanted more shows, because that's what you're getting.
You're going to smoke the entire pack. I think there's been at least twice in the last couple of days we wrap up recording and it's like, oh, now we need to do another portal show because something just happened. Like legitimately, like hit stop and then hit record. And
this one, we sat down to record this one, and we had a show pre-recorded for one of the guys that we knew was coming in the portal. And right as we were about to hit record, looked up and it was like, oh, that has now officially happened. So go ahead and hit stop and go ahead and get that one posted, and then we'll record this one. So, okay, everyone out there in transfer portal land, I'm going to need you to chill for about 30 minutes so we can talk about Oregon and Washington. Thank you very much.
Yes. Buckle up. Let's see how this goes. If there's an odd break, like right in the middle of the show, like that's poorly edited, you know why. So we are discussing what we learned from Oregon's 49-21 win over Washington to end the regular season. First win in a little while for Dan Lanning over Washington. First win ever over Washington, in fact, for Dan Lanning. And it was an emphatic win. So we're going to discuss it. Tom, my first takeaway in this, and it's not really has anything to do with Oregon. It is the fact that Washington freshman quarterback DeMond Williams is going to be a problem in the Big Ten. For Ohio State fans who haven't seen him yet, imagine Chris Olave with an arm. That's basically what you've got with DeMond Williams. He's fast as heck. He's not a big guy, but he was like, 17 of 20 in this game and was running well. He gained 69 yards on the ground. He also lost 52 yards on the ground. So to give you an idea, there was 10 sacks in this, or 8 or 10 sacks in this game, 10 sacks, and some losses on some other carries. But watching him, it was kind of a little bit like Antoine Randall back in the day, where this is just some really dynamic guy who also throws. And Buckeye fans might want to pay attention to him when Ohio State heads out there next year.
Yeah, he was legitimately impressive. And I wasn't sure when the game started why Will Rogers wasn't playing. I didn't know if he was hurt or something. It was, he was out. Will Rogers out, brackets, interceptions. That was the reason Will Rogers was not playing. And, this is a tough spot to throw a freshman quarterback into. I mean, Ohio State fans, I think, have a better sense for how difficult it is to play in Autzen Stadium and how difficult it is to play against the Oregon Ducks this year, because they are, in fact, pretty good at football. But yeah, it was an impressive performance in a losing effort for sure. And when you look like that as a freshman, it's a little like Nico Iamaleava at Tennessee at times, where, he had enough moments as a freshman that you kind of went like, he's gonna sand down the rough edges and figure some stuff out and be pretty good eventually. That's kind of where I came out with Rogers, because it was a very, very impressive performance. A performance adjacent to him that was also very impressive. Tony, let's talk about the Oregon defensive line, because holy Moses, this got to a point where I was partway through the game, and like when you were a kid and you were like reading a book and it was like, oh boy, I have to know if this character lives, so I'm just going to skip ahead to the end. That was me pulling up the box score and going, how many sacks do they end up with? Because they've got like 7 suspiciously early in this game. And the answer was 10. 10 sacks for Oregon in this game against a actual real life, like Ken Faga mirror opponent. That was one of the most impressive things I've ever seen out of a defensive line. And it was everywhere. It was the middle of the defensive line. It was the ends. the middle of the defensive line, Derek Harmon and Jamari Caldwell. I mean, we've talked about them some, but there was one play where Caldwell was in zero technique, which means, we talk about 3 techs all the time or 1 tech. He was in zero technique, which is just you are straight up behind the center. And it looked like he was just pushing a blocking sled. Just pushed him 5 yards back, right back into the backfield, and got him right in the quarterback's face and flushed him. Derek Harmon was right there. And then it was, I think, Jeffrey Bossa, the linebacker, actually cleaned that one up. But, if they get that kind of push against you, just forget about it. Like, you have no chance at all. Jordan Birch was back. We've not seen Jordan Birch in several of the games we've watched. He's been banged up a bunch this year. He got one in a speed rush over the right tackle. Mateo Uyunglele, this game was working over the left tackle. He got a sack at one point. Birch got another sack later when he was back over the left tackle. There have been games where they've just kind of like Uyunglele was just working over the right tackle. They were moving guys around a bunch this game. And it didn't matter where they were. They were just absolutely eating Washington's lunch in a way that you don't see one conference team do to, if you're doing that to Purdue and they haven't beaten an FBS team this year, that's one thing. If you're doing that to a team that's, Washington finished 6-6. They weren't great this year, and the offensive line was absolutely not great this year. But they just annihilated Washington's offensive line all game long.
Yeah, I do think DeMond Williams caused some of those sacks, but not, again, they were dominated. There were times he could have gotten rid of the ball, but he chose not to and then just got swallowed up. But 7.5 of those 10 sacks came from the defensive line. And I'm including Tatum Tuioti in that, who is the outside linebacker like Mateo Uyunglele is, and then Mateo Uyunglele will go to play defensive end when Jordan Birch is out. So those 3 guys rotate. Tuioti had a sack and a half, and Birch had 2.5 sacks. Uyunglele had two sacks as well. Like, those guys just dominated. And even as I'm watching this, I'm coming away thinking, is this the best pair of defensive tackles in the country? And I know what people will say about Michigan, but watching this, maybe you got to recalibrate with the Washington offensive line, but especially, and not to spoil anything, watching the next game against Penn State, defensive tackles played much differently. But in this game, you see the potential of Derek Harmon and Jamari Caldwell, and they were awesome. And they were physical. They were pushing dudes way back, fast, quick. We know what Derek Harmon can do. He had a really good game against Ohio State. He had a really good game in this one. That whole defensive line was just consistent and constant pressure. And DeMond Williams had really no chance. And this is a guy who can escape a bunch of things. But when he would just drop back for too long, he would get swallowed up. So really impressed by that entire group and the athleticism and just the constant pace and the way they went after it. Because, again, it was a little bit different in the next game that we'll talk about, Penn State, not in this show, but down the road. So, yes, I would agree with you on that defensive line.
And, what was interesting to me is anytime Washington was trying to take a shot downfield, you saw them just go max protect. It was like, oh, we got 2 guys in the route, so we're going to throw downfield and we're going to go 2 guys in the route. And boy, that limits your pass game quite a bit. And it was honestly amazing how much and how well they threw the ball given that, because it was nothing was easy, because job one was, okay, don't get DeMond Williams killed. And they were somewhat successful at that some of the time. But even then, he was able to find guys downfield, which I think kind of ties together the first 2 points, which is, yeah, Oregon's defensive line was an absolute monster, but also DeMond Williams is very impressive.
Yeah, he's an exciting guy. Let's talk about the other quarterback, Dylan Gabriel, in this one. We're going to say it every time we talk about him and watch a game. He's just the calmest, coolest guy. It doesn't matter. You feel like, especially watching DeMond Williams, who's a true freshman, and Dylan Gabriel's a 13th-year senior, the amount of experience between the two is way different. DeMond Williams kind of panics and runs around. Dylan Gabriel will run around, but he's in complete control. And the comp I'm going to give you, Tom, let me know what you think about this one, because as I'm watching it, this is the name that popped into my head. Sully Sullenberger. He's Sully. Like, he gets hit with geese, and he's like, you know what? We're going to be okay. We're going to, and he's calm, he's cool. Doesn't matter. He can 1,000 flights and nothing goes wrong. Something goes wrong. He's got it. He's cool. Don't worry about it. He will land the plane, and he's running for his life at times. And while he's doing that, he's looking for a safe landing for the football.
Well, I mean, between these two quarterbacks, Damon Williams was the one that got run into by, birds more during this game. But, in terms of calm, cool, and collected, yes, I think that's a great comp. There was one play that I wrote down, there's a bunch where he just, sort of extends a plays with his legs and then throws it downfield or whatever. There was one where it was like there was a third down and Washington looked like they had him penned in. Obviously, everyone downfield's covered. He's like, okay, well, I can't throw it. There was one Oregon blocker out in front of him blocking one Washington guy. And the spy that Washington had out there had to kind of look and make a decision. He was kind of coming up, and it was just, okay, I'm going to go inside. I'm going to go inside the guy who's getting blocked. And Dylan Gabriel kind of went, okay, and went outside. And if he'd gone outside, Gilly Brill would have said, okay, and gone inside. Like, either way, whatever, man, it doesn't matter. You go where you want to go. I'll go where you don't go, and I will pick up the first down. It was just, everything just looks so effortless. It's and he's an incredible athlete. It's not like it actually is just kind of like, yeah, well, whatever. I don't know. It just that's just the vibe. It's just like, all right, well, whatever. Listen, I'm not here to harsh your buzz. I'm not here to tell you what to do. You do whatever you want to do, and I'll do what I want to do. And then I'm going to pick up a first down, and we're going to keep going down the field. That's just kind of the vibe from Dylan Gabriel all the time. It's really, really amazing and very, very impressive.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's stay on the Oregon defense for a minute. We talked a bunch about the Oregon linebackers, at least some about the Oregon linebackers last game. But this was, sort of an extension of the Oregon defensive line. And as you said, some of the guys who we talk about as defensive linemen are, they're technically outside linebackers, but they really get into the defensive line fit sometimes. Bryce Betcher is like a true defensive, a true linebacker. He's number 28. We talked about him a little last time. He's the guy who is also the baseball player who got drafted by the Astros. The first play after Oregon took a 14-6 lead in this one, he blitzes. He was on a run blitz and got in there so fast. He was right at the exchange point, right as the quarterback and running back are trying to figure out who's going to have the ball. And he hit the running back immediately, like before he even had a chance to like settle the ball in, and forced a fumble. And it went from it's 7-6 to Oregon scores a touchdown to take a 14-6 lead. And then immediately the first play they get it. And then they scored a touchdown, like, I don't know, 2 plays later or something. And then it's 21-6. And it's just like, oh, and now the game's over. That was quick. And the linebackers Jeffrey Bossa, the other linebacker, number 2, he continues to be impressive. It's a good linebacker core. They kind of get lost behind all the, the bigger name players. The defensive line kind of gets a lot of the attention, and especially the edge players on that defensive line. But the inside linebackers, they are pretty impressive as well.
Yeah, and you see them consistently. There's a delayed blitz from Betcher. They use their linebackers really well, and you notice them, as opposed to something we talked about in our Tennessee rewatch is how you don't often notice the linebackers, and you notice them here because, one, you can hear them. I think that's a big part of it. You can hear them hit people, and then even Justin Jacobs, when he gets in, he was an Ohio kid, got a sack in this one. So yeah. You have to be aware of them, and Betcher finished with 11 tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss, a sack, a forced fumble, and was effective throughout. Let me talk about this one, Tom. Let's see. This is neither here. It's not offense or defense. What the heck was up with Washington's kickoff strategy? They weren't kicking deep. They were apparently afraid of the returns. So it's like, you know what? Let's kick it to the 10. Let's kick it to the 20. And give up some returns. I didn't understand this whole thing. It was completely baffling. I don't know if maybe they don't have a kicker who can put it into the end zone. They tried something new each time. There's like some squibs, there's some pop-ups, and every single time it led to a pretty good field position for Oregon. And this was, I don't expect Ohio State to do this same kind of attack, but it was very bizarre the way that they were trying to give Washington the ball, because they got some pretty good field position out of it throughout the game. And I don't know what they saw. I don't know what they were worried about. And yet they do that, and then they still give up like 25 yards a return.
Yeah, that was bizarre. And I've only watched a couple Washington games this year, including this one. And both times it's been the issues that they've had on kicking have been like a recurring storyline through the game. So I think they just don't have anyone that can kick the ball out of the back of the end zone. And they don't have anyone who can kick the ball consistently through the goalposts, both of which are kind of important parts of the kicking game. And they don't have it. It was like, I'm sure this seemed like a good idea on Tuesday. Once you saw how the first one got run back to like the 38-yard line, like how much worse is it going? I mean, how much worse is it really going to be if you squib one, kick one on the ground, like whatever. You'd be better off kicking the ball out of bounds and giving it to them at the 35 rather than kicking it to them in the air at the 30 and then having them run it back to the 42. Like, you just kick it out of bounds every time. You can do that. That's a legal thing. Well, it's not a legal thing, but the penalty for the illegal thing is less bad than what you're actually doing. Yeah, that was a bizarre thing. Real briefly before we move on to the next substantive thing, can we talk for a moment about Noah Eagle not knowing what the old Oaken bucket was? Like, my brother in Christ, you are the lead announcer for a network that's calling that's calling Big Ten games, and they were talking about the Indiana Purdue game, and he wasn't like he brought up the old Oaken bucket and was kind of like, oh, I didn't know that, and it was like, what? How do you not? It's not the biggest rivalry in the league, but that feels like it's something. Indiana's actually been a pretty big story in the league. That's probably something that should have come up in your research at some point.
Yeah, don't mention the things that you don't know.
That's actually good advice for lots of things. Like, go back and learn more about them later. But don't necessarily bring that up. I guess this is one where I think we learned, but we'll talk more about Tez Johnson on the next show.
Ooh, yes.
This is one where he didn't start. I think he was still kind of working his way back from an injury. We talked about him not playing at all against Wisconsin. He played just a little bit towards the end of this game. 3 catches, 36 yards, a touchdown. I think he was probably somewhat limited in this one, but then, again, not to get too far ahead of ourselves, had a huge game against Penn State. So, whatever lingering injury concerns were there are no longer injury concerns with him. But this is an offense that looks so different when he's out there as compared to when he's not. It's still, they were fine. They were a much more ground-based attack in this one because Washington's run defense is garbage, but it is a different offense when Tez Johnson is out there compared to when he's not.
Oh, for sure. And you look at this, and they spread you out, but when he is part of that, when he gets the ball and the defense is spread out, he's insane in terms of the cuts that he can make. But they've got a bunch of different guys that can do things well, do specific things well. And Oregon does a good job of getting them the ball to do those things. And I'm talking tight ends Terrence Ferguson and Kenyon Sadiq, who is a deceptive guy who scored. We'll talk more about him against Penn State, but he's a guy that can run jet sweeps. He can catch the ball. He's about the same size as G. Scott, and they use him in some unique ways. And then, of course, Terrence Ferguson's one of the best tight ends in the nation, and they use him all over the place. I think it is interesting that Oregon's offense dominated this game, 226 yards, or 222 yards rushing, 236 yards passing. But again, it's similar to what we've talked about before. The longest play was a 39-yard pass play. They rushed for 222 yards. The longest rush is 20 yards. They just consistent, like 5, 6, 8, 9 yards a carry, and it's impossible to stop a defense or stop an offense like that. It's impossible to get ahead. And then when they have the ability to pick up third downs like they do, you're at a loss. And Oregon took all of these advantages, the ability to run the ball, your calm quarterback, his accuracy, to go 7 for 7 in the red zone on touchdowns. So if you do that, you're almost certainly going to be undefeated. You're going to win those games. And they were efficient, 5 of 8 on third downs. Like this was a clinic, and it could have been worse. The yardage could have been worse, other than the fact that Oregon had some very short drives and had very good field position.
Yeah, they did get the ball in some good field position, but as you said, if you have 7 red zone possessions, you're feeling pretty good about your chances to win. If you score on 100% of your red zone possessions, you're feeling pretty good about your chances to win. If you have 7 red zone possessions and you score touchdowns on 100% of them, well, you're probably. I am struggling to think of a game where that has been true, where a team has not ended up winning the game. I think you're probably batting pretty close to 1,000 on that. And one of the things that helps Oregon there is just the diversity of the threats that they have on offense. Ohio State fans, I think, maybe take this for granted to a certain degree, where it's, you've got a Travion Henderson and you've got a Quinshon Judkins, but you also have Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate and Emeka Ibuka, and then sometimes you use a G. Scott. And that's Oregon's offense. Is they use everyone. They've got multiple. Jordan James is one kind of running back. Noah Whittington is a different kind of running back. Terrence Ferguson is one kind of tight end. Kenyon Sadiq is another kind of tight end. Tez Johnson is one kind of wide receiver. Evan Stewart is another kind of wide receiver. They have so many different ways. Trayshawn Holden, who didn't get to finish the first Ohio State game for reasons. He's another different kind of wide receiver. They have so many different ways to attack you. And Kenyon Sadiq, they ran an end around to a tight end where it's just like, okay, the tight end's going in motion, which is obviously this is just, okay, they're trying to change, set up a different blocking angle or something. Nope. Hand it off to him as like a jet sweep kind of thing. Just an end around kind of look. Noah Whittington, who's the second string running back, he is fast. Jordan James is like power. Noah Whittington is fast. They gave him like just a little one of those end around things or big run on the perimeter. Then a nice shot down the middle to Terrence Ferguson, then a keeper for Dylan Gabriel for a touchdown. Like that was one of the drives that they had. Just boom, boom, boom. They ran an end around to Sadiq later. There's just so much diversity to what they do and how they attack you. It's really impressive.
It is, and the guy that got pulling the trigger is accurate, but then can run, can keep plays alive. You can call runs for him. He is very good at reading the runs and the handoff and the RPO and all of that stuff. So they've got a good attack and they've got really good weapons. And another thing that we continue to see is the tight end screen, which we saw the first time they played Ohio State. You're going to see it again, and just be prepared for that. They'll run it a couple of times a game, and they're pretty effective at doing it. They're effective in this game. They were effective doing everything, which watching this, I now understand why Dan Lanning called it their most complete game offensively, defensively, and on special teams. And I would not disagree with any of that, especially when the game we watched before this was the Wisconsin game, where I don't know if that was their best performance in any facet of the game. Let me see, Tom, where do we want to go here? I don't want to go back to the defense already, but I will. 13 players for Oregon had at least a half a tackle for loss. So 13 players got tackles for loss. 8 players got at least a half a sack in this one. So to give you an idea of the breadth, the width and the breadth of the attack and the depth that they have, they were all over the place, as we said. I just wanted to mention that. Anything here? I did like how Washington would defend the RPO a couple of times by just keeping their defensive end back and trying to stay in the passing lane of where that ball is going to go. And then Dylan Gabriel's just like, okay, I'll just wait a little bit, because the offensive line, Cornelius and Connerly are both like, we will give you time to throw. Don't worry. And there was one where I think it was Connerly was just like letting the guy get kind of close to Dylan Gabriel. And he's like, okay, this is enough. You're close enough. You're just allowed to look, no touching. It was like a bouncer at a club. And then Dylan Gabriel just like waits for the RPO, the receiver, to clear the linebacker or the defensive end and hits him for a first down. And so I thought it was interesting the way Washington tried some stuff, but if you're not creating pressure, good luck on stopping any of this timing.
Yeah, speaking of stats that are probably pretty determinative of who's going to win the game, if you get outsacked 10-0 in a game, I'm going to guess your win percentage is not real good. I have not, again, done an in-depth study on that. I'm just going to guess that's probably accurate. And the offensive line is impressive in other ways as well. There was one, they use kind of the hard count or the clap, and they'll get you to jump. And There was one where they used it. They Washington jumped. The center snapped it. It almost looked from one angle like Gabriel wasn't expecting the snap, but it was, like, well, we'll snap it. And everyone kind of like froze for a second. And it was like, oh, well, free play. And they got a nice gain of Trayshawn Holden out of it. It's just one of those like little things they do well. And they're constantly looking for like the little edges. They ran a PAT, a fake PAT where they threw for a 2-point conversion that ended up getting called back on an illegal man downfield. I think that might have been a Johnny Cornelius was downfield on that. But, it's just the little stuff. It's all the Chip Kelly crap that they used to do where they're going for 2 at weird times. And, and then you're down 8-7 early in the game. And it's like, well, now we're chasing a point all game long. They do a bunch of that little annoying stuff that is, that can add up, can make a difference. And then, of course, when it doesn't work, then Dan Lanning looks like an idiot. And everyone says Dan Lanning's an idiot and he's trying too hard. So it's just kind of a mixture of that stuff. Special teams, let's hit special teams since we're talking about fake PATs and stuff. Gary Bryant Jr., I think we briefly mentioned him on the last one. He had a nice punt return at one point against Wisconsin. He had a nice punt return here against Washington. Not 80 yards or anything, but probably, 20 yards, 25 yards, something like that.
29.
It's just, was it 29? Okay. So yeah, so it's, and that's just like a little like, flip the field. Just, you think you have a punt, you think you have a nice punt, and it's like, oh, you net it out 15 yards on that punt. Like, well, that's not what you were looking for there. But, it makes that stuff. It's just, again, little stuff that makes a difference. I don't think we've talked a lot about their kicking this year. Atticus Sappington, 14 for 16 on field goals. He had a long of just 42 this year. He missed a 51-yarder against Idaho in the season opener, a 43-yarder against Ohio State, but 42 is his long this year. And Andrew Boyle, we got a chance to see him. He's their long kicker. Sappington is kind of good from short. Ohio State did this. It was in the late 90s. Like Josh Jackson was the short kicker, and then they had someone else who would come in and kick the long ones. I forget who it was now, but
well,
do you remember?
Even with Petrie and Pretorius, they would do
Oh,
it.
yeah.
Was Bartholomew, was he the long kicker? I know he was the Mike Malfett, maybe.
Yeah, he was the punter, but I can't remember. But they would do this at times. Was it Mike Malfat? Maybe
I think it was.
Yeah, it might have been Mike Malfat. Anyway, you're not here to hear about mid-90s Ohio State place kickers. You're here to hear about 2024 Oregon place kickers. Atticus Sappington, pretty reliable from short. Boyle, he got a 56-yarder on this one, and it looked like it was maybe a couple yards short. So, if they do have a 50-yarder to win the Rose Bowl kind of thing, it's probably Andrew Boyle. If it's shorter than 45, it's probably Sappington.
Yeah, that was a close one. That one hurt. He could tell he wanted that one. How about that touchdown throw to Terrence Ferguson on a rollout, a dead sprint rollout, and late in the game, Dylan Gabriel is rolling to his left and is getting chased and is able to just find the tiniest windows in this game against decent coverage, and receivers are making the catches. Just it has to be so frustrating to do everything right, and you've still got coverage, and then he finds a little bit of a seam. And there were times where Washington's defense in the secondary kind of would get lost, and where they defend areas where there's nothing there to defend. Like there's nobody to defend, and if they'd find a receiver, they maybe would have been able to do something. But Dylan Gabriel took advantage of the Washington weaknesses throughout this game, and he would check down. He's perfectly fine checking down. He's okay with that because, again, they don't mind getting 6-7 yards of play because that's what their running game is, and it's consistently been like that. And so I think overall it's just very efficient offense in this one. Again, nothing huge, but just wait. The potential is always there, as Ohio State fans know. Like, what did Evan Stewart do? I know we know he must. He's a freaking Biletnikoff winner based on what he did against Ohio State. 1 catch for 4 yards in this game, but you know what he's capable of, and that's the thing about this entire offense. Doesn't matter what they do in any particular game. You know what they're capable of doing in any particular game.
Yeah, you see them just and wherever you're weak, they have something that can counteract that. Washington is terrible against the run. They're 81st nationally. against in terms of yards per carry allowed. Ohio State's 5th nationally, Oregon's 55th nationally, just to sort of put those numbers in perspective. Against the pass, Washington is 4th nationally, 5.7 yards per attempt. Ohio State was, Washington was 5th nationally, 5.7 yards per attempt. Ohio State was 4th nationally, 5.6 yards per attempt. Oregon was 6th nationally. So 4, 5, and 6, those three teams all very good against the pass in terms of yards per attempt. Versus ranked teams, Oregon and Ohio State both kind of top 15, Washington 42nd. So Washington's pass numbers might have been a little bit impacted by playing crappy offenses. But, you just look at the numbers, you go, well, you can run the ball on Washington, and Oregon ran the ball on Washington. And then a lot of the throwing came off of the fact that they were running the ball on Washington. One other stat that I thought was notable in terms of Oregon scoring 7 touchdowns on 7 red zone possessions. And obviously that factors into this number a little bit. Ohio State 1st nationally in red zone touchdowns allowed, 37.5 red zone trips, percent of red zone trips opponents scored touchdowns. Oregon 26th there. Washington 79th. So you can score on Washington because you can run on Washington when you get in the red zone, but you can also run on Washington because you have Jordan James. Jordan James was running hard all game. He also had a really nice play where there was a reception out of the backfield, and he just dump trucked a Washington defensive back. It was just like, oh boy, that did not feel good. That is not going to be, you're going to get memes. Like, that was just not a good time. And, Jordan James just goes very, very, very hard. And every time I look at him, it's just like, it does not look like it would be fun to tackle him. And Noah Whittington, it's like, it does not look like it would be fun to try to chase him down. It's just, it's a little bit of a thunder and lightning dynamic between the two of those guys. And it makes it very hard. It's just, like I said, whatever you're bad at, they have something that can take advantage of that.
Yeah. There's going to be so much hitting in this Rose Bowl because the running backs will give as good as they get, and they will try to run you over. So I think they're going to try to maybe compete to see who can have the biggest hit offensively. And it's going to be fun. The last thing that I have is there were a couple of times Tatum Tuioti, who is the outside linebacker when Mateo Uiagalelei is a defensive end, essentially. There's a couple times he got trapped having to defend the pass against a running back. And even I think one time there was a slot receiver that he just dropped into a zone. It was like, we're not going man here, that's for sure. And not that you would put him in man. But just coming off of this Tennessee game where Ohio State was able to trap defensive end outside linebackers on Travion Henderson, I think that's something to watch. They might be able to get something there. And he's a big dude. He's not like 6'2", 225. He's like a guy that can play on the edge, and you don't want him defending anything to do with the pass towards the sideline, and he might be able to get something there. But that's all I've really got here, Tom.
The last thing I had was just, I was surprised at how well Washington threw the ball, given that they were under just absolute attack, assault all day, all game long. Damon Williams, as you said, I mean, the completion percentage was very high. They also, they got a couple shots downfield at times. The first play from scrimmage was like a 35-yard gain. They went after Jabbar Muhammad down the sideline. I looked it up. 30-plus yard plays from scrimmage allowed this season. Ohio State has allowed 9 all year. That's first nationally. Oregon has allowed 20 this year. That's 49th nationally. So, if it is a big play game, that probably benefits Ohio State, because the Ohio State offense is a big play offense. The Oregon offense is a big play offense. The Ohio State defense has not really allowed you to do that much, and the Oregon defense has allowed a few more of those. So that's just kind of one of those, like, just sort of file this away kind of stats. Not that it's going to be the single defining thing, but going to be, so just one more thing. And then speaking, Tony, of one more thing, how is Oregon playing all of these games where quick and abrupt defensive movement is like a conversation on the broadcast? I don't think we've seen or heard that at any point in any Ohio State game. There were 2 of them against Wisconsin, and then on this one, there was one where the Oregon defensive line shifted and they called a false start on the offensive line. And the rules guy, after twice saying, when they called it on the defense against Wisconsin, and the rules guy said, no, they got both those wrong. Those are legal football moves. This time they called it on the offense, And he said, well, no, because you got to look at the way the defensive lineman's like flapping his arms or whatever as he's moving. That's not a football move. But Oregon will use those kind of like late shifts on the defensive line to try to get you to jump. And it feels like, that sometimes it should be called on the offense, sometimes it should be called on the defense. But the Big Ten officiating crews, according to Terry McCauley of NBC Sports, were apparently 0 for 3 on getting those correct.
Well, and it's like you can shift if it's early enough, but if you shift and also move your arm in some sort of a manner, I don't know, like a fair catch signal for a defensive tackle, whoa, boom, we're going to stop the play right there. You learn something new every time you watch Oregon, including rules and officiating. And sometimes you're watching the officials learn the rules as well, or apply them however they want. So there you go. I think the last thing on the corners, they will pick on whomever, and they picked on both corners, all of the corners in this one. Now, I don't know that Jabbar Muhammad has stepped up to the level of like Jermod McCoy. When we're watching Tennessee, Jermod McCoy, number 3, you could tell he is their best corner. He is the guy that will make plays. And of course, didn't matter for Ohio State. They still went at him. Right now, I know Jabbar Muhammad is a veteran and he's been acclaimed and all of that, but they didn't care and they went right at him right away. So I don't know that there's one guy you avoid or one guy you attack in this one. I think you just go with whatever matchups you like and go from there, or whatever plays you want to call up. And if it's there, if that first read is there, I don't think it really matters who's on them, because you trust your guys. So that's all I got, Tom.
Yep. Okay. I think that's it. I think it's a good, and don't worry, we'll have plenty more to talk about in a very, 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 very different performance. We'll be talking about the Oregon defense again when we talk about the Penn State game.
Yeah, there's a lot of ups and downs throughout this whole thing, Tom. It's like a Lifetime Christmas movie that we're watching. So I don't know how it's going to end. Hopefully everybody gets together and all the drama goes away and they can live happily ever after. So thank you all for tuning in. Hit that thumbs up before you go. We would appreciate that. And subscribe to the channel if you have not yet done so. Hit the bell to be notified when we're dropping all of these videos and going live and everything else, because we do have plenty more coming, as you know. And as always, you can find us at BuckeyeHuddle.com. First month right now, just $4.99. Sign up. It'll get you through the Rose Bowl and everything else for the next month beyond that. Find us there at the Buckeye Huddle message board, presented by Jeff Ruby's Columbus, talking about all of this, transfer portal, where all these pieces fit, and much more. Thank you all for tuning in, and we'll talk to you guys later.